When Jungkook wrote a letter of regret, Jimin burned it instead. But his reasoning left Jungkook speechless. "You started all this." "Jimin, that's my letter." The words tumbled out of Jungkook's mouth like glass shattering on concrete. He stood at the doorway of the practice room, the overhead light flickering slightly, casting elongated shadows across the polished floor. A bitter smell curled into his nose, burning ink, smoldering paper, the faint trace of cologne he had worn that day. In the corner of the room, the small metal trash can flickered with controlled fire. And Jimin stood there, utterly still, watching the flames devour something he must have recognized. The letter. His letter. The one he had poured his chest into. The one he left on Jimin's songwriting desk like a white flag in a war he didn't know how to win. Now it was ash. Jimin didn't flinch at the sound of his name. He didn't apologize. He didn't even blink. He simply turned, eyes hollow but glinting with something older than anger. Something exhausted. Something betrayed. His voice was calm, flat, like the space between two earthquakes. "You started all of this, Jungkook." And just like that, the silence between them grew teeth. Jungkook's breath caught in his throat. There were no cameras here. No fans. No stage makeup. Just two people who used to finish each other's sentences, now standing on either side of a fire that had no interest in forgiveness. Weeks earlier, they still laughed on screen. They still leaned into each other during interviews. They still exchanged glances during dance practice, sinking without thinking. But underneath, something had cracked quietly, like ice shifting on a lake. It had started with whispers, accusations, rumors. That Jimin was difficult. That Jimin wasn't pulling his weight. Rumors that Jungkook knew were false. Rumors that came, in part, from his own team. And yet, he said nothing. Not once. Jimin had waited. He had stared at his phone, rereading messages that never came. He had walked into rooms Jungkook had just left. He had sung next to him without ever hearing his voice. Until one day, the silence became its own kind of violence. Jungkook wasn't good at confrontation. He never had been. He thought time would heal what words might ruin. But instead of fading, the silence rotted. So he wrote. He stayed late one night after practice. Sat at the very desk where Jimin once scribbled lyrics about loneliness and love. The same desk where they had once written a song together, barefoot and laughing at 2 a.m. And he wrote. He wrote about the guilt that weighed on his chest. The regret that clung to his ribs. The words he should have said before the rumors spread, before the space between them grew so wide. He wrote about what Jimin meant to him, how his silence wasn't from indifference, but fear. How he thought he was protecting their friendship by avoiding the fire, not realizing he had already lit the match. He signed it with shaking hands, folded it, left it on the desk, right next to Jimin's journal. Then he left. But hours later, when he came back to retrieve a forgotten sweatshirt, he walked into a scene he couldn't have imagined. Jimin. The fire. The ashes of his heart curling into smoke. They didn't speak for a week. When they stood side by side in rehearsals, their movements were precise, but their eyes never met. When they performed on stage, their voices harmonized, but never connected. The fans never noticed, but everyone else did. Youngie lingered more often after rehearsals. Namjoon started asking strange questions. Taehyung offered to cancel dinner plans. But no one asked directly, because whatever had happened between Jungkook and Jimin felt dangerous to touch. One night, Jungkook sat alone in the recording studio, headphones around his neck, a beat looping endlessly. The dim light cast long shadows across the soundboard, and all he could see behind his eyes was the image of that flame. His voice cracked as he whispered into the silence. "Maybe I am a coward." He pulled out his phone, scrolled past unopened messages, drafts, words he had typed and erased more times than he could count. He started a new one. "Jimin, I don't know how to fix this, but watching you burn that letter, it hurt more than writing it." But he didn't send it. He deleted it. From that moment on, Jungkook made a quiet vow. No more letters. No more unsent messages. If he was going to fix this, he'd do it with his voice. With his presence. With honesty. It was a week later, during rehearsal for the upcoming world tour, when something cracked. They were mid-routine. The room was filled with music and sweat. The choreography demanded sharpness, precision, unity. But suddenly, in the middle of a sequence, Jimin stopped. His body stilled. His breathing sharpened. Everyone froze. Jimin turned toward Jungkook. For the first time in what felt like forever, he looked straight at him, not through him. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it hit the room like thunder. "Do you know what hurt the most, Jungkook? Not the silence. Not even the rumors. It was that you wrote me a letter. when you could have just come to me." Then he walked out. The music kept playing, but nobody moved. Jungkook stood there, every breath shallow, 100 apologies gathering at the tip of his tongue. But none of them mattered, not until he could say them to Jimin's face. It was past midnight when Jungkook found himself walking the dim hallways of HYB's basement floor, unsure if he was looking for something or running from something else. Maybe both. The silence here was different. Not the kind he shared with Jimin in dance studios or green rooms. This silence had weight. It pressed against the chest, thick with forgotten memories and echoes of music no one played anymore. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd left his phone charger in the vocal booth upstairs. But now he was stalling, avoiding the elevator, avoiding the world, avoiding himself, until he heard a sound that pulled him out of his haze. A muffled voice. Low. Hoarse. He followed it around the corner and stopped. Through the narrow sliver of light between a cracked door and its frame, he saw Jimin. Alone. Sitting on the floor against the mirrored wall of a smaller practice room no one used anymore. The lights inside were dimmed, casting a soft blue glow over his figure. His knees were pulled up to his chest, arms resting loosely over them. He was talking. To someone. Or maybe no one. Jungkook shouldn't have stayed. But his feet didn't move. His breath barely dared to exist. "You always said you'd have my back," Jimin whispered. "But when everyone else was talking, you were just gone." Jungkook leaned in slightly, just enough to see more clearly, but what he saw made his heart stutter. A voice memo app was open on Jimin's phone. He was recording. Not a message. Not a song. A confession. Earlier that day, the rehearsal room had been quieter than usual. After Jimin's outburst the night before, no one quite knew how to behave. Jungkook hadn't spoken to him. Not yet. He didn't trust his words to do the right thing. Not after everything he'd already failed to say. Instead, he tried to show it. He arrived early. Picked up Jimin's water bottle when it fell. Laughed at a joke he didn't understand just because Jimin had smiled while saying it. But smiles were armor now. Polished and empty. Still, Jungkook noticed the way Jimin's hand trembled slightly during a spin. The way he stared a second too long at the floor before a high note. Signs. Cracks. Guilt sat inside Jungkook like a second spine. Every movement reminded him of it. Now, crouched outside the practice room, he listened. The rumors were bad. But they weren't the worst part, Jimin's voice cracked. The worst part was wondering if you believed them. Jungkook's hand pressed against the cold wall. No, he hadn't. Not for a second. But he hadn't said that out loud. Not to anyone. Least of all to Jimin. "I waited for you to call. Or text. Or look me in the eye and say it wasn't true," Jimin continued, voice wavering. "But you didn't. You just went quiet." There was a long pause. And then, softly. "So I started believing them myself." Jungkook's breath hitched. He pushed the door open. Jimin flinched at the sound, eyes wide, vulnerable, caught. Like a glass sculpture under spotlight, suddenly afraid to break. Jungkook stepped inside, slowly. He didn't say a word. He just walked until he was standing directly across from him, the polished floor between them reflecting their strained silence. "I didn't believe them," Jungkook said, his voice barely more than air. Jimin blinked, slowly. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Jungkook didn't answer right away. Because there were no right words anymore. No sentence that could patch over weeks of abandonment. So instead, he sat down, cross-legged, facing him. "I thought, if I stayed quiet, it would blow over. That it would be better if I didn't get involved," he said finally. Jimin let out a bitter laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "So you chose to protect yourself." "I thought I was protecting you too," Jungkook whispered. "Well," Jimin said, eyes narrowing, "you were wrong." They sat there in silence for what felt like hours. Eventually, Jungkook asked, "Why the voice memo?" Jimin hesitated. Then, "It's easier to talk when no one's listening." The honesty stung. And yet, there it was, his truth, raw and unfiltered. Jungkook reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and without a word, hit record. "I was scared," he said into the mic. "I'm not used to people needing me for more than what I do on stage. I didn't know how to show up." He looked at Jimin. "I still don't, but I'm here." He hit stop and handed Jimin the phone. Jimin stared at it, then at him. And for the first time in weeks, his expression cracked just a little. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. Like maybe, just maybe, they were standing on the same planet again. They left the room without speaking. They didn't need to. But when Jimin opened the shared group chat later that night, he saw a new message from Jungkook. "JK. I'm done writing letters. JK. From now on. I'll just talk. Even if I mess it up. JK, especially if I mess it up. It was supposed to be a normal vocal rehearsal. Just them, their producer, and a melody still in progress. But when Jimin and Jungkook were left alone to work on a duet harmony, tension thickened the air like humidity before a storm. Try the third interval up, Jungkook said, carefully avoiding eye contact. Jimin didn't respond. He adjusted the mic, tried the note. Wrong key. Jungkook sighed, more out of habit than frustration. That was the crack. Jimin's voice cut through the air like a blade. Don't do that. Jungkook blinked. Do what? That sound you make. Like I'm not trying hard enough. He stepped back from the mic. You used to believe in me. Now you sound like everyone else. The room pulsed with the unspoken. Jungkook opened his mouth, but Jimin was already walking out. Later that night, Jungkook followed him to the rooftop, where they used to escape during rookie years, when the world felt too heavy and success too sharp. The city below blinked quietly. Jimin leaned on the railing, arms crossed. Jungkook stood beside him. I don't think you're not trying, he said. I just don't know how to talk to you anymore. Then stop talking at me, Jimin replied. Talk to me. Or don't talk at all. It was said without venom. Just exhaustion. Jungkook nodded. Okay. Then listen. And for the first time since everything fell apart, he told the full truth. How he'd overheard the rumors but didn't know who started them. How people in the company blamed Jimin's attitude. And how he'd frozen, afraid of choosing sides, afraid of rocking the boat. How he regretted it every single day. When he finished, the wind moved through the silence between them. Jimin's voice came soft. Do you know what being alone feels like in a group of 7? Jungkook looked at him. I do, Jimin said. Because you left me there. Days passed. The distance didn't vanish, but it changed shape. Less like ice, more like fog. They rehearsed. Ate lunch in the same room again. Made small jokes. Progress in inches. One night, Jimin texted. JM, do you still write lyrics? JK, not lately. JM, want to try again? They met in Studio C the next day. No pressure. Just a beat. A few lines. Some silence. Then Jungkook played a melody he'd been afraid to show anyone. Minor key. Sparse piano. Haunting. He titled the file, Ashes. Jimin looked at him. This is about the letter, isn't it? Jungkook smiled faintly. Yeah, but it's also about what survived. Jimin wrote the first line of the chorus. From the flames, I saw the shape of what we never said. By the end of episode 5, they weren't fixed. Not whole. But something new had started, more honest, more scarred, but maybe stronger. Jimin no longer burned pages. Jungkook no longer wrote in silence. They sang. Together. And the pain? It became music. The clip was only 38 seconds long, but it was enough to detonate the internet. A rough demo. Low vocals. Minimal mix. But unmistakable voices, Jimin and Jungkook, layered over sparse piano, harmonizing on one haunting line. From the flames, I saw the shape of what we never said. The tag on the leaked audio was simple. BTS_leak_ashes_demo.mp3. No one in the company claimed to know how it got out. No one in the group admitted to leaking it. But fans knew pain when they heard it. Within hours, theories exploded. Was the song about a breakup? Was it about internal conflict? Why did Jungkook sound so broken on the bridge? Why did Jimin's voice crack right before the hook? Hashtags trended. Reactions went viral. Analysis videos broke down every syllable. And then came the real gut punch, an old backstage clip resurfaced. Silent. Grainy. Just a few seconds from 2 months ago. Jimin sitting alone. Jungkook walking past him without looking. The caption read, It was never just a song. Inside HYB, chaos. PR scrambled to manage headlines. Managers demanded explanations. One staff member quietly suggested scrapping the song entirely. Jimin and Jungkook sat side by side in the meeting room, both quiet as their phones buzzed endlessly on the table between them. You think it was hacked? Jungkook finally asked. Jimin shook his head. Doesn't matter. It's out now. Silence stretched. Then Jungkook added, At least they finally know. Jimin looked over. Know what? That we bled for this. Later that night, Jungkook posted on Weverse. Jungkook, Ashes wasn't meant to be heard yet. But maybe it was meant to be felt. It came from a real place. And sometimes, that place hurts. It was vague. It was real. It was enough. But Jimin went further. A full post. No PR filter. Just him. Jimin. There was a time when we stopped speaking. There was a moment when I burned a letter. And there was a day when he stopped writing and started showing up again. This song is part of that story. We're not perfect. We're people. We break, we mend, we sing through it. The internet stopped spinning. Then it applauded. Not because the story was clean, but because it was true. The next rehearsal was different. They didn't say much. Didn't need to. But when it was time to run Ashes live for the first time, neither hesitated. The music swelled. The lights dimmed. And on the bridge, right where the demo had cracked, Jungkook reached for Jimin's shoulder. A simple touch. Grounding. Present. Apology, without the burden of words. Jimin didn't flinch. He leaned into the harmony. And the two voices, once divided by silence, rose as one. The question came out of nowhere. Backstage, right after a sound check, a well-known music journalist approached with a casual smile and a loaded question. Some fans believe Ashes is about betrayal. Would you say that's true? Jungkook froze. He was used to scripted interviews, pre-cleared questions, diplomatic answers. But Jimin, standing beside him, sweat still drying on his skin, didn't blink. Yes, he said. The room went still. The journalist raised a brow. Betrayal by who? Jimin didn't look at Jungkook, but his voice softened. By silence and by fear. Later, Jungkook sat in their dressing room, elbows on knees, head in hands. You could have said anything else, he muttered. Jimin leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Why? Was it a lie? Jungkook looked up, eyes rimmed red. No, it just still hurts. In episode 8, tension simmered again. Not like before. This was subtler, quieter. Two people tiptoeing through their shared wreckage, unsure how to rebuild what they'd burned. That night, during vocal rehearsal, the producer asked if they wanted to rework the bridge, maybe smooth the falsetto, make it cleaner. Jungkook shook his head. No, leave it cracked, he said. That's how it was. Jimin met his eyes. And finally, something shifted. Because maybe it didn't have to be perfect. Maybe they didn't either. Later, Jimin showed Jungkook a new lyric idea, tentative, unsure. It wasn't for Ashes. It was for something else. Hopeful. Soft. Unfinished. We stood in smoke but found each other in the dark. Jungkook smiled for real. Not out of politeness. Out of something deeper. Something healing. Let's write that next, he said. By the end of episode 8, they weren't defined by the burn anymore. They were building something in the aftermath. And the echo? It was beginning to sound like music again. The arena was packed. The energy pulsed, a current flowing through the crowd. The lights were blinding, and the stage was set. Yet, there was a hollow space between Jungkook and Jimin, not physically, but emotionally, something they hadn't quite conquered. Tonight was everything. Their comeback performance of Ashes. But the real battle wasn't with the audience or the choreography. It was internal. The lyrics, the song, the pain, it wasn't just a performance. It was everything they had felt, laid bare for millions to see. Their truth. And it terrified them both. Backstage, just before stepping on, Jimin caught Jungkook staring at his own reflection in the mirror. His expression was unreadable. Jimin approached, his voice quiet. Nervous? Jungkook didn't look at him. Terrified. Jimin grinned faintly. So am I. They exchanged a glance. No words. Just understanding. The moment the lights hit them, everything blurred. The music started. The intro piano echoed in the vast space. Jungkook and Jimin stood there, side by side, just like they used to, before everything broke. As they began to sing, every note of Ashes felt like it was pulled from their very souls, raw, unfiltered, and beautiful. The melody wrapped around them, and the pain that had once seemed like a burden was now their strength. On the bridge of the song, the rawness in Jimin's voice cracked, just like it had in the demo, but this time, there was no hesitation, no regret. Jungkook was right there, his voice a steady anchor, catching him in that moment of vulnerability. They didn't look away from each other. Not once. From the flames, I saw the shape of what we never said. The chorus hit hard, and the crowd erupted, but for them, it wasn't just applause. It was the culmination of everything they'd gone through, the forgiveness, the healing, the truth. Backstage, after the performance, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins, Jungkook turned to Jimin. That was everything, he whispered. Jimin smiled, that familiar mischievous glint in his eyes returning. We survived, didn't we? Jungkook nodded. Yeah, we did. Together. Jimin glanced down at his phone, and then back at Jungkook. I think we're ready for the next song now. Jungkook chuckled. You're right. But this time, let's write it together. And as they exited the stage, the noise from the audience dimming behind them, The two of them shared a quiet understanding, one that had been lost and then found again. End of episode 10. Finale, epilogue, From Ashes, We Rise. Months later, when they released Ashes officially, the world didn't just listen to the song, they felt it. It became a symbol of overcoming, a testament to their journey of pain, silence, and redemption. The song was a story not just about the fallout, but about the healing that followed. Jungkook and Jimin weren't just two artists anymore. They were two souls who had found each other again. Amidst the wreckage of their fears, and from the ashes of their silence, they had risen.